It's primitive, it's raw, but it works.
How UniSat supported Fractal 1 hour on the UniSat wallet, that feels like a technical talk and a workshop for developers.
It's possible to make more experiments on Fractal, pushing it to next level.
Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Fractal podcast. As a recap, the Fractal podcast is launched to highlight the work of builders in the Fractal and Bitcoin ecosystem. I'm Spencer, one of the core contributors of Fractal. And today, we're super honored to have Lorenzo, my fellow core contributor to Fractal and the founder of UniSat. Lorenzo, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello everyone, this is Lorenzo from Fractal and UniSat. Hi Spencer, nice to meet you.
Yeah, super good to have you here today. Let's start from the beginning. I think many people in the Fractal ecosystem know you, to be someone who has been innovating and contributing to Bitcoin ecosystem for a long time. But before Bitcoin, before everything, you were an engineer first of all. So what did you first build? What did you first start working on? Back in the day.
I have been a developer engineer for actually more than 10 years as a game developer. So I built games across PC platform and mobile and console. So I built a lot of games. So I'm actually an engineer with very good game engine experience. So it's very surprising to myself that I began exploring the opportunities in crypto with Bitcoin first, initially in 2018. So actually, we have been working on Bitcoin for many years, especially the Bitcoin script, the virtual machine, and the smart contract that embedded in Bitcoin environment. So we have been there has been a long since the beginning. And last year, we have been working on Ordinals. So we built tools, platforms, and marketplaces for Ordinals. And then we come to the Fractal, the project, which is much more exciting to me. So yeah, that's the short story.
Awesome. Why did you want to build in Bitcoin in the first place? There were so many other ecosystems in crypto at the time. There's Ethereum, of course, Solana, whatsoever, and oh, actually, Solana is probably not around yet at the time. But yeah, why did you decide to build first on Bitcoin?
Actually, the blockchain of that era is EOS in 2018. We learned a lot from Ethereum and EOS, but we still decided to work on Bitcoin because it's actually very unique technically. Bitcoin, it has been evolving for more than 10 years, just like what I did in the game industry. And we find it very actually, it's a bit complicated to learn the history of Bitcoin. The more you learn, the more exciting things you can discover through it. Actually, the UTXO structure, we found it's very good for actually build the infra for a very large universe. So that's the initial intention we built on Bitcoin. So yeah.
It's really interesting. Could you dive a little bit into that? In terms of why do you think that the UTXO model is actually good in general? Because a lot of people have been talking about, account-based models, which of course Ethereum have, and so on. So, what's your perspective there?
Like others, we first built on Ethereum, and then we found Ethereum has a shared global state for all the apps. So everybody has to share the same global state, and every transaction sent will change the whole state in a way that people are intentional and doesn't want it happening. And then we switched to EOS, and we found there are a lot of variables you have to control while actually configuring your applications. You have to worry about the memory, the CPU, the network, and a lot of issues. So we finally come back to the simplest solution that Bitcoin itself provides. It's primitive, it's raw, but it works. But it has its own limitations that the virtual machine itself is ancient. It's actually not a modern programming language. but yeah, I think for Bitcoin, it has something to be explored to see that what we can achieve in the virtual machine. So we did a lot of experiments to see what we can do with the Bitcoin script, and then these kinds of experience we learned are actually brought into the innovation of Fractal Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. So take us back to when UniSat first launched their products for Ordinals as well. What, just help us understand, why did you decide to build those products in the first place? What fascinated you about the Ordinals theory, Ordinals protocol at the time, and how did you think about it when you, first built UniSat as a product?
Actually, before Ordinals, we think Bitcoin is limited for applications to build, very limited. But Ordinals shows that we can actually embed some kinds of data like audios, videos, and text files into an inscription and use that inscription on blockchain to serialize, to persist a lot of data and states. And have the whole structure being built recursively using something like recursive inscriptions to build a very complicated system. And we found the opportunity to actually build a very large system by actually utilizing the ordinal theory. So that's the very reason that we went into this this field to trying to build something that being useful.
Then when did you sort of know, when you and your team, when did you know that UniSat was building something that the community was interested in? What was kind of the signals that were like, oh my God, I think we built something that people actually want to use?
Actually, when people was fighting ordinals, that they say it's another kind of NFT for Bitcoin, just like what happens on Ethereum, then I enforced myself to actually find some merits from the ordinal theory. And then I found that the inscription is actually not, it is the NFT, but not, but far more than an NFT can provide. For the inscriptions, it's actually not on Bitcoin, the block headers. It's actually in the segment, segmented the segment, the extended segment of the Bitcoin blockchain, so that you can do a lot of things flexibly by actually using it, by reusing the whole inscription library on chain. And we have some experiments in our main chain, Bitcoin main chain explorations, and then we extend the explorations in Fractal. So that's the intention. We want to build it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and then I think let's go to this, this Fractal project, right? I think many people who listen to this interview probably already know what Fractal is. But there's a lot of people who, always still ask us, what is Fractal? Is it a whatever? Is it a whatever? There's like a lot of categorizations. So Lorenzo, let's get this straight. What is Fractal to you, or what is Fractal in your words?
It's actually a pragmatic way to extend Bitcoin into a system. Actually, the reason I want to talk a little bit more about why we built Fractal is actually because that we met a lot of mainnet congestion last summer when we were working on UniSat Marketplace. We built the marketplace on Bitcoin main chain, and it got congested every time that people are actually are actively trading on our platform, and we can do nothing with it because everything on the main chain by that time is getting congested. We cannot optimize. As an engineer, we found nothing we can do but only sitting around and without doing nothing. So it's time to think about how to extend Bitcoin in a simpler way that people can actually trading around, even the main chain get congested. That's the initial idea. And the question after that is, can you find a way that solve this problem without actually introducing new variables? Why this is important? Because if you extend Bitcoin using some other modern chain technology like Solana or Ethereum, then you're not Bitcoin anymore. We just want to solve the problem within the boundary of Bitcoin itself, trying to solve Bitcoin problem using Bitcoin itself. So I think that forms the initial way of doing things to solve the problem in a pragmatic way without introducing new variables. And then we found that Bitcoin itself, historically, there are many reasons that limit it, but as an extension of Bitcoin, we are far less limited by those limitations, so we can do far more things than that, including OpCat or some operations far beyond that to actually extend Bitcoin from a single blockchain into a system. The blockchain itself doesn't scale, but the system can scale in many ways. So that's the whole intention, and we built the first prototype of Fractal. So that's where we are here.
Awesome. I think one of the things that you mentioned is earlier is that like you're really trying to scale Bitcoin, and I think in the technical light paper that was published earlier in the year as well, we talked about how this is recursive concept, right? And I think earlier you also mentioned about recursive inscriptions. So tell us a little bit about these recursive layers, recursive concepts. What does it mean to you, and how do you want the community to kind of like imagine it going forward?
Actually, as a developer, the recursive concept is very familiar to we are actually very used to using it to solve problems by doing things recursively to solve problems that seems like unsolvable. By the concept is virtualization by virtualize itself into some layered virtualization. People often do this in game engines to actually have a very complicated game thing, which can reference a lot of game scenes, other game scenes, and game scenes can actually refer to itself like mirror to solve some complicated issues in that. So for us, the idea is actually using Bitcoin to solve unlimited problems that can on top of the infra. If you have one instance of Fractal or two instances of Fractal, you have very limited way or configurations to build for specific scenario. And when the scenario changes or you are going to fit for actually satisfy for more requirements, you have to change the configurations and you want more instance, just like what happens in the cloud servers. Initially, you have a prototype instance for your initial customers, and then situation changes and you want to build more instances for more customers, and the cloud enables you to build numerous instances to deal with different situations. So that's the intention why we need many instances in a layered way. It can be done recursively or horizontally or vertically. It depends on the situation you met, and you can have different configurations and different set of parameters so to actually fit for different scenarios.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think one of the things that I think a lot of people were very surprised by was also how successful our mainnet launch was, right? I think from the outside, a lot of people were like, oh my God, it feels so carefully orchestrated and so on. But yeah, give us a bit more insight on what were you maybe more surprised by in terms of the mainnet launch of Fractal on September 9th this year, 2024?
The mainnet launch is actually about what you are going to change about the Bitcoin code, the software, the source code. You have to do it very carefully to choose the fixed set you want to change, something that you really want to change, but you know that you don't have to change or you are not going to change it this time at this time point. So it should be done in a very careful way that to maintain the compatibility with Bitcoin without breaking the compatibility, but also have the keep the possibility of change it in the future. So it has to be done very carefully, and we did it. So we feel very fortunate about that. But like you said, the most surprise things in the game in the mainnet launch is actually the enabling the opcat, the code, the opcode that we didn't anticipate it. The opcat, the operator being enabled can trigger such a movement of everyone that are eagerly wondering about what is opcat and what can we do with it. So we built a few instances and prototypes to demonstrate how we can utilize the new operator, actually a re-enabled operator in Bitcoin. So there are still a lot of new instances and new experiments with the operator. I think for not only for UniSat team, but also for other technical teams like people from Stackware or from other ecosystems, they are wondering that if the opcode, the opcat brings new opportunities to connect their ecosystem to Bitcoin in an elegant way, how can it be done? So we are here and we're learning, and we hope we can provide help to them to actually build connections with Bitcoin in a simpler way.
That's a really interesting point, Lorenzo. I think what you mentioned was really the expansion of the ecosystem, right? I think Bitcoin as an ecosystem, of course, has its core audience. And then with Fractal, I think we brought this to another set of audience, or the same set of audience extended, right? And I think with the enablement, in some ways accidental, in some ways community contributed and voted on, what happens is that we now can, essentially extend this ecosystem to include others, right? Like Starkware, like others who are building, like Script, for example, whom we have on for the first episode, who talked about how this is really awesome for them because their Script platform is then able to utilize this to build use cases and enable developers to build use cases. And I also went through some of the sample code and whatnot on Script, and it's super cool, right? Super excited to see what some of these things can be possible. Yeah, let's speak a little bit maybe to what kind of like developers are you looking to attract on Fractal? What do you think developers should be building on Fractal?
Actually, this is a very good question that I can answer it with a very long answer. But being short, I have to say first that for developers on Bitcoin, people who want to build project on Bitcoin, then they can build on Fractal in the same way. I think that's a very important point that I want to emphasize, that the mechanism behind Fractal is actually identical to what happens on Bitcoin. That's the intention, to maintain this connection, to make sure that you can have as free as you can, just like what you can do on Bitcoin mainnet. But for developers, actually, for many years, developers found that building on Bitcoin is actually much complicated and difficult than building on Ethereum, because Ethereum has a programming language that's far more modern to developers to learn, and easier to program and easier to find bugs. And for Bitcoin, this is also our difficulties to actually extend our work on Bitcoin mainnet. Fortunately, we built a lot of API using accumulated code base, a very large code base that supports protocols like BRC20, Runes, and other Ordinals libraries, and different programming languages library to support them to actually build on Bitcoin without having to know a lot of details about what's happening when composing the transactions and dealing with the UTXO sets and other trivial issues. So you can just start using Fractal by using the API provided by UniSat and have your business running smoothly on Fractal, and then learn more about the details about what happens on the blockchain to actually expose your code base to the inner world of the blockchain. And when you are good with it, you have a code base that's running your business in a good way, and you can extend your business onto Bitcoin mainnet. That's the one direction, that build your prototype, build your MVP on Fractal, and then extend your business onto Bitcoin main chain. And you can have the reverse direction, that if you have a project running successfully on Bitcoin mainnet, you can also actually extend your code base, your applications, your services onto Fractal without actually changing too much. Just like what happens when we were working on UniSat Wallet. The wallet actually doesn't need too much change to make it work on both Bitcoin mainnet and Fractal mainnet. It's very the change takes less than 1 hour to complete to support both networks, and potentially for more instances in the future. We hope we can build new instances without changing too much code to support different network configurations. So application developers should expect the same results, that they don't have to change too much from Bitcoin mainnet to Fractal different instances.
How UniSat supported Fractal, in 1 hour on the UniSat wallet, that feels like that should be a talk, a technical talk, and a workshop for developers to reference.
Yes, the developing feeling is just like what happens on Polygons and Ethereum. You just have to change the port, and yeah, it works, just that in that way. So when I said very carefully, making the changes very carefully, I mean we choose to modify some of the implementation of Bitcoin to ensure that Fractal can we can do more things in the future on Fractal, but without touching that some critical parts that connects the Fractal to Bitcoin, without breaking it. So people don't have to worry about what they built on Fractal suddenly doesn't work on Bitcoin main chain, because the compatibility will be carefully maintained. So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this compatibility part, right? I think that's something that a lot of people in the community did have questions for us on. One of the things is, in regards to the mining side, right? And I think for those people who are listening to this podcast who don't really know about the mining side, Fractal has a cadence mining approach, which essentially is 1/3 of the blocks actually is reserved for merge mining, and then 2/3 of the block rewards is for permissionless mining. Right, that's one part of what's a little bit different, and yet at the same time quite compatible. And the other part is regards to asset transfers between Bitcoin and Fractal. Lorenzo, I would love to hear how you think about this, in terms of Fractal and Bitcoin compatibility overall.
Yeah, there are two parts of the compatibility. The first one is the mining. Why the mining is important to this is because the mining is a very important part of the ecosystem that Bitcoin holds. That if we want to build things seriously on Fractal, we want the mining community can be aware of that. And can support it in their own way. What does it mean by in their own way? You can just support Bitcoin, letting Bitcoin to support Fractal. That's called the merge mining. And you can support Fractal directly by exclusively using your mining rigs to actually mine Fractal in different ways. You can actually change your hash rate back and forth, and trying to have the configurations you want anytime to change it to have a different mining configurations to support Fractal in your own way. The mining is something that connects Fractal to Bitcoin in a smooth way. because for other blockchains, you have different ways like POS and some other modern ways to actually keep the security of the whole blockchain. But for Bitcoin, it's actually very unique and very large hash rate over the world, across the world, that many miners are actually holding the infrastructure. We think this infrastructure is very suitable for the complicated different scenarios we are about to meet in coming years on Fractal. Because on Fractal, we want people to build in every different situations for their own purpose. So a well-maintained mining, the infrastructure can be utilized to support them. If we choose another methods other than POW, we cannot support the whole system in such a smooth way. So we build it and we actually build around Bitcoin to share the same hash rate to support the same infrastructure, to making it into a infrastructure system to support different scenarios. So let's prepare for future development, more scenarios, upcoming scenarios in the future. So yeah.
That is awesome. And let's now talk a little bit about the asset type of things, right? I think, but before that, I do want to also call out that I think we've also seen in terms of the mainnet launch, post mainnet launch, that the miners have really responded to Fractal, right? I think in terms of the hash rate side of things, for the merge mining side, I think the last I checked, Fractal has about 350 exahashes of hash rates contributing to Fractal for merge mining. And given Bitcoin's overall hash rate of 650, that's about 50+% of like Bitcoin's hash rates actually currently merge mining Fractal. How do you feel about that? In your own way, Lorenzo.
Actually, that shows a very strong signal that miners they are welcoming the newcomers of the Bitcoin ecosystem. They also, just like developers and general community members, they want to explore the new opportunities that the newcomer can bring. I want to say that it's not only a technical opportunity, but also an incentive opportunity for Bitcoin. I mean, for Bitcoin as an isolated blockchain, for many years we have the question: can Bitcoin sustained by the economic incentives Satoshi maintained the halving. For many years, when the block reward getting smaller and smaller, people are actually worried about the security model of Bitcoin, the blockchain. And for Fractal, what it can contribute to this scenario is that we bring new incentives to miners. For merge mining part, it's actually a free reward for them. So that's why miners are issuing a very strong signal against this. That's they want the incentive model to be actually appended in different ways. For Fractal, this is some way to contribute, and there could be more new ways to explore to contribute the system. For Fractal, we have the configurations that 1/3 and 2/3, and probably in new instances we can try different ways to contribute finally and eventually to make Bitcoin the ecosystem, the whole economic model to be our layered system that brings a lot of different kinds of profits for miners to make decisions toward what they can do on Bitcoin according to our different explorations. It should be much different and much more interesting to them. Other than if imagine a world that people can only mine Bitcoin, the one single assets using their mining rigs, and when the block reward getting down to zero, they found suddenly they can do nothing against it, because Bitcoin itself, the blockchain itself, it has the ceiling floor that currently capped in a very low ceiling floor. So miners are actually they're actively seeking this with us to know more about what we can do to actually having a much more better incentive model. So yeah, we can explore this with them. Yeah.
It's super interesting. Thank you, Lorenzo, for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about, I think, what we mentioned earlier about essentially the other part of compatibility with Bitcoin, right? Which is the transfer of assets and so on. Right now on Fractal ecosystem, there's like awesome implementations by Simple Bridge, by Bull Bridge, and I think it's just really my understanding is that it's really the start of many things to come, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. Share with the audience here. What are some of the things that you think you want to kind of emphasize when it comes to asset transfers and I think what we called as elevator in our system as well?
Actually, it's the very early days of Fractal that we have some primitive constructs like a simple bridge and a Bohr bridge that it functions in a way that people understand that transferring assets from Bitcoin mainnet onto Fractal mainnet and transferring back to the Bitcoin mainnet in a way that people are familiar with. It has nothing to do, at current stage, has nothing to do with the elevator. The elevator happens when there are multiple instances that working in the same way so that people can transfer assets from one layer to another layer using the same mechanism that Bitcoin itself provides. That's the intention to transferring assets without doing more additional things across different layers. That's why it's called elevator. But currently, we are limited to it. We just launched the mainnet 1 month ago. There are a lot of engineering works to go with it. So we have to do more experiments before starting new instances and before exploring the implementation differences. I mean, there are a lot of options for bridging them over. Like you have to trade off between the decentralization, the trustlessness, or you have to control that where the assets are minted or burnt to actually have different degrees of complexities. The configuration set, we have to do many experiments before settling on the optimal ones. There are a lot of works to go, but I think it's really a great journey that we can explore in the near future, in the coming 6 months, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Lorenzo. I think in terms of what you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast, you mentioned about some of these virtual world ideas. We'd love to hear from you. What kind of world-changing ideas will Fractal enable going forward, or what do you hope to see?
Well, at the early days that I was working on Bitcoin, I expected to build a world on top of Bitcoin by utilizing the hash rate, the very large scale hash rate as its infrastructure. But then I found that it's limited, and we can do very limited things on a single blockchain, and we are figuring out we have to find a way to actually build a larger infrastructure on top of Bitcoin to actually unleash its potential to build things around that. I know that not only game industry, but also the financial industry and other industries, they want to utilize the power of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin itself, it's like I said, it's limited to actually sending transactions on the mainnet. The TPS is very limited. So we actually the reason that Fractal we believe it can change this is that we can scale, like I said, vertically and horizontally, or combine them to actually support different scenarios. For the if we treat it this way, if we build it in a horizontally scaled way, that is just like many difference in your world for different scenario in isolated way by having them communicated horizontally for different rooms. It's just like a palace with many different rooms. You connect different rooms in different ways so that people can come across different rooms horizontally to actually have a very large palace. And you can also build it vertically, recursively on top of the layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, and layer n in a vertical way, so that you can actually pass things around and up and down in different layers using the elevator. It's the depth first, and it should be easier for programmers to understand it. It's different way to extend the system. For the traditional scenarios, they can find a suitable way to actually fit their use cases onto this infra. So that's the goal of the Fractal project. We want to build it to suit every different use cases.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting, I think, to your point, how, like traditional finance and many other sort of industries have already been starting to look at Bitcoin, right? And I think it is very much like constrained to like the Bitcoin ETF and some of those things for them at the beginning parts, right? But then I think as people start developing a bigger relationship with Bitcoin, with Fractal and so on, then I think a lot of these ideas that they have currently been thinking about, whether it's like this concept of the palace or different rooms that you mentioned, I think that could be applied in honestly so many different industries, right? Even maybe in building countries or so on, like the network state movement and so on. Those could be like super cool as well to see. What are some of the? Yeah, sorry, go for it.
I mean, the isolation between different instances, different fractal instances. That's a good perspective to see it. The isolation allows people to actually isolate the security model, isolate their different parameter sets, isolate their different implementations. Even for ordinals or ruins BRC20s, they can have different versions on different instances without interfering each other's. The isolation should be done horizontally. And if you want to build a system that inherits that good merits from your very initial instance, you can build it vertically. So to write less code to have more functionalities on the same branch. So yeah, they serve for different purposes.
That's awesome. So what are some of the non-obvious things that Bitcoin, that you want people in Bitcoin and Fractal to know about either of these ecosystems?
A lot of people know Fractal as when the mainnet launched, they think it's another fork of Bitcoin code. It's just a side chain for Bitcoin. But like I said, it's actually, if you read the light paper, you know that it's the very beginning, the very early, it's the very first instance of the whole system. The intention is building Bitcoin into a system with numerous instances of Fractal. So actually, the first instance is very important to run it correctly, along with what Bitcoin can do. So you see that in 1 month, we actually have the BRC20, have ordinals, have runes, have active protocols on Bitcoin mainnet. We have them on Fractal. So we have to make sure the initial instance can have the identical functionalities toward what we can do on Bitcoin mainnet, and to have business across Bitcoin and the first instance, and then we can extend it horizontally and vertically into different instances to compose the whole system, and then decide when new requirements comes, we can decide where we can put that in the whole hierarchy, where we have to implement this on different layers to actually have a balanced system. We can tweak against it. If there will be bottlenecks, we can actually have more instances or less instances with better balanced, self-balanced mechanism to make the whole system not being overloading. But yeah, just like what happens in the cloud computing, it's a long way to go to have a clever system that fits such complicated situations.
Yeah, you mentioned as well that Fractal has been now I think as the time that we have been doing this recording, it's been a month, right, since Fractal launched. Were there any like panic moments? Were there any scary moments? I think from the outside, it just feels like we've been shipping things nonstop, right? It's like expansion of the skill tree, like you mentioned. It's like the first chapter in some ways of this system that we're developing. But what were over the past month? What were some of those moments that were a little bit, oh wow, like it stunned you a little bit?
Actually, in the short history of UniSat, we met a lot of panic moments, like what happens last summer when we were on UniSat Marketplace, that we actually have a very serious issue that make people creating fake inscriptions on the marketplace. And we have to compensate for a lot of community members by that time. But for Fractal launch, I think it's quite smooth for us to actually prepare it for months, for actually more than 6 months to have things running smoothly. But yeah, there are a lot of transactions, currently more than 15 million per day transactions. I mean, so it gets it has become a serious challenge for our engineering team, the infra team, to actually have to optimize the software and upgrade the hardware to support the different protocols on Fractal. Because I mean, for any other blockchain, we actually checked different Bitcoin layer 2 solutions. All of them have sum them up the daily transactions. That we actually have more to optimize against. So it's a hard work for us to deal with. But luckily, fortunately, our engineering team actually in last month, they are very busy, but it seems that we have actually finished the task peacefully and smoothly. That also surprised me because it's really hard. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a super
Yeah.
super complex problem, right? And I think to your point, you really, I think we definitely feel fortunate that I think the team overall and the community has been able to rise to the challenge, right? Any advice on that particular point about maintaining infrastructure for Fractal for teams that are maybe building indexers, building, infrastructure in the ecosystem? Any advice that you have for them?
Actually, I wish I had more time to actually formulate the code base so that they can actually read our source code and actually learn it much faster than exploring on their own to learn from our mistakes. I wish I had more time so that they can just read a lot of documentations we wrote in a way that currently the time is so limited, so the documentation is hard to understand and it's very short. There are a lot of internal notes we want to turn into a public documentations for people to understand it easier, understand the concept, the fractal concept, and the actual the instance in reality, how it works and how we can improve about the network connectivity, how we there are tons of documents that we want to expose in a way that's easier to read. For different developers, I think they can do what they want to do, just like what they want to do on Bitcoin mainnet. Because on mainnet, there are a lot of very good material for them to learn. So yeah, you can learn from those materials first and come to Fractal and see what's the difference, the subtle difference between this, like the block confirmation time is it's actually 30 seconds for people to confirm your transactions. It's convenient for user, but a little bit harder for developers to actually making correct decisions in their project toward this. The block confirmation and the fee structure, the difficulty adjustment algorithm, and the mining part, and each different feature that Fractal provides, especially the new operator, the opcat, what they can do with it. But yeah, the document is limited, the API is limited, but they are functional. You can use that to build things right now. And you can come to us, always. You can always come to us, and we can answer questions that you met on Fractal when building it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think we have been definitely trying to encourage the ecosystem to kind of reach out to us, and we have multiple approaches of doing that, right? I think we have many collaboration groups, working groups. We have, of course, if someone messages us on Twitter or in the Discord or Telegram, we are often very, very receptive to essentially help them out if needed, right? I think the other thing that I think the community definitely is already aware, and by the time I think we publish this podcast, we would have already announced the Fractal ecosystem grants season 1 are sort of like recipients. So I think over the past 2 seasons, right, between the season 0 and also season 1, I think we saw a lot of like very good builders contribute to Fractal, and I think we've been, of course, very, very blessed by their presence in the ecosystem. In terms of applications, I think we have over 100 of applications across these 2 seasons. And in terms of the recipients so far, we have a very, very wide range, right? Companies building infrastructure tooling, platforms for developers, of course, early days, the mining F2 pool and mining pool supporting Fractal, and also many marketplaces, inscription tools, and so on. In general, I guess since we've just recently concluded season 1, do you have any like sort of things that you want to share in terms of your philosophy as well for how we think we should be sort of pushing forward the ecosystem support going forward from a grants perspective?
About the difference of season 0 and season 1, I found that for season 0 there are more infra team, and for season 1 there are customer services that people can experiment with it. So yeah, I think for in the near future that for different grants that there will be more applications that you can experiment with to actually know more better about what Fractal can do. And for these builders, for the builders that who have the our blast to go in the ecosystem, we want them to know that we will be consistent with Bitcoin. It's not only something in documentation, but also the core principle in the implementation that we just want to follow what we can do on Bitcoin, just like you use the ordinals, the runes, and every protocols on Bitcoin. If possible, we can actually having support for all of them, probably in an elegant way that currently the API it's identical on Bitcoin mainnet and on Fractal. It's intentionally built in this way that you can use the API to support both networks and even more networks in the future. So that's the intention to actually follow the decisions that Bitcoin make. But based on this, we can have innovations, and we can have experiments on top of it. Following Bitcoin doesn't mean that you are limited by the single blockchain. You can have new experiments in the future. Maybe you can have more opcodes, more than opcat. It's probable. It's possible to have them in the future, and if it doesn't work, we can conditionally shut it down or doing more extensions to it to actually make the experiment more exciting on Fractal, and we can learn lessons from it, and then have a better design, have a matured design, the sophisticated design on Bitcoin mainnet, and I think that's the unique contribution we can do for Bitcoin as a whole system. Yeah, that's a philosophy and principle we want to be consistent across years.
Yeah, consistency is definitely one of those very underrated things, right? Because what happens is that many of these teams, when they're developing their applications and software, they want to make sure that like if the compatibility and support, the ongoing support is not going to break at some point. But at the same time, I think most developers actually in our ecosystem do care about innovation, right? Do care about trying new things that maybe they haven't been able to try before. And I think the idea of like being able to experiment in a more risk-free or risk-minimized fashion, I think is actually quite appealing to many of these developers, right? When it comes to the opcat opcode and also other implementation ideas that we may or may not have in the future. Yeah.
Yes, the ordinals, the ruins, and BRC20's protocols like that make it possible to do experiments on Bitcoin. So we feel like that it's possible to make more experiments on Fractal to actually pushing it to next level that people can experiment with everything on Bitcoin.
Any other philosophy of a Fractal that you want to share with us?
Yeah, of course. If you look at the original tweets from Bitcoin, Fractal Bitcoin, that you will see the den of Fractal. So it tells that we don't argue. We comes with batteries that you can build everything by supporting different protocols. You can read the den of Fractal. That's probably the best place to go for the philosophy behind Fractal.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think many people who have been following this podcast or following Fractal's project definitely have been following along the Fractal Bitcoin Twitter, right? And I think there's just so much information over there, and I think it's super awesome that you're pointing them to the specific tweet, right? Zen of Fractal. For yourself, what is your personal philosophy in terms of like how do you deal with stress? How do you deal with all the pressure, all the things, and how do you de-stress after a long week?
Actually, I'm a Taoism who actually benefits from the traditional way, the Eastern way of recovering from the workload, the work-life balance, how to do it correctly. But I think the very important point for my life is actually find the balance point that how can you contribute to an industry continuously and actually having your own vision and goal being capable you are going to do this continuously in a long term and in many years, how can you actually conquer challenges in a way that's stably moving forward in a constant velocity? I mean, people can rush, they can have very high velocity at a given time, but how to contribute stably in a way that in many years and finally you get your eventually get your goal being accomplished. I think that's more fascinating to me to actually find a way to do that. By building Fractal, by building Bitcoin into a system, I would like to solve other industries' problem, including the industry that I have been in the game industry. I want to solve the problem of game industry. And by solving other industries' problem, Bitcoin itself can be useful. I mean, Bitcoin as the core value of the crypto space, it can gain the value by helping other industries to conquer their challenges, and it grows from that, from doing that. Bitcoin itself, if it doesn't do any help to other industries, it cannot scale. It scales for nothing. Even it scales, you can do nothing. But by helping other industries, it could scale in a way that it cannot be done on itself. So I mean, I call this the external view. I find myself, the more time I'm in crypto space, the more external I'm getting. I mean, seeing things from external in an external way. I mean, it's very helpful for me to moving forward.
I totally agree. It's also like how you started, from a different industry, coming into the industry, and now you're like, because of your involvement in the industry, now seeing, the beyond that, right? How many more years do you think you can build in Bitcoin and on Fractal?
I mean, infinite, just like what Fractal inherits. Yeah.
Infinite. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, real world, it needs the financial construct. It needs the electronic cash system. It needs something like Bitcoin. But Bitcoin in the last 10 years, it didn't grow into something that can help. So we are going to we're trying to fix in this by actually having Fractal as an extension to Bitcoin to build it into a system that can work. Remember the white paper that Satoshi wrote? It should be a system, not only a single construct. So yeah, that's the whole idea, and we are just following.
That's awesome. I guess, Lorenzo, maybe one last question before we go. If a genie were to grant you one wish today, a genie comes out of a magic lamp and grants you a wish, what would you ask for?
Oh, should be many, but I mean, the most thing that I want to on this, if it can be done immediately, but I think honestly, I think nothing could be done immediately in a way that if we wish for something. I mean, if I can wish, I wish Bitcoin as a system. It can scale and can help the real world, and the real world will benefit from Bitcoin. I mean, that's something I wish for, and I'm struggling for.
I love it. Yeah, it's also like, not only are you wishing for it, but we're also putting in the time and effort over the next infinite years to make it happen. This has been great. This is, one of our, I think, earlier episodes, and we definitely will do more of these in the future. So super awesome to have you, Lorenzo. Really enjoy working with you, so far, and we really want to, contribute together to make sure Fractal as an ecosystem becomes even stronger. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in as well. I guess we'll say bye to the audience.
Bye bye.